Yes, we did decide to remake HADES, yes, that one, for a GameJam, with varying degrees of success. But before we get into the video, my name is Helper Wesley, I've made these games, and I make weekly devlogs. So to begin with, if you saw the trailer that I put out last week, yes, a tree did fall on my house. A rather big one, actually, and a second one that was also almost as big fell right next to my house. So GameJam was supposed to be 10 days long, from Friday to the next Monday, so you would get 2 weekends to work on it. But when a tree falls on your house and knocks out the power line, you lose a couple days. I spent those 3 days brainstorming and coming up with ideas and watching YouTube videos on HADES to break down the game into its core parts, so that I could recreate it for this jam. So after researching HADES, I broke those down into combat, which is fast and punchy, randomized rooms and enemy encounters, upgrades upon death, so when you die you bring back a currency that you can spend to make your character better, boons, which are these temporary upgrades that you get each run that are randomized, and then the last thing that I don't think I could ever get into a jam game, but we tried our best, was a rich story with interesting characters. We spent that time... Oh, speaking of we, my teammates in this whole catastrophe were Lightspeed 6 and Cutout 2.0. I knew that I wasn't going to have time to make the art for what turned out to be a massive project in the 7 days that I now have. So I went on to itch to find some free-to-use art packs so that I'd be a little further ahead than I would be otherwise. And so I spent the first day focusing solely on combat, giving the character a light attack, a heavy attack, a dash, an enemy to beat up on, some knockback and push, as well as combos. The combos were a bit of a mess because instead of having different animations for each attack in the combo so people could recognize them, I set it up so there were 5 of the same attacks in the light attack combo, and then 3 in the heavy attack. And while I was doing this, Lightspeed sent me the first draft of the music and sound effects, and I slotted those in and submitted my first nightly build to the team. I wanted to make sure that each of them were playing the game and giving me feedback as I went along so that I wasn't just making the game in a bubble. When Tuesday came around, I was already planning to work more on the combat. I really wanted to focus on that specifically because, well, that's going to be what you do in the game, so I spent the most time doing that. I snagged a heart from the art pack and put it up on the screen, so I could now lose health, snagged the wizard character from the art pack and a large orc, and quickly made some temporary attacks that they would use that I could replace later. And so this was basically the triangle of enemy types. You've got the big and blocky, the long-range, annoying pain in the butt, and the tiny fast enemies. At this point I was thinking I would be able to add more enemies into the game, which didn't happen, but I knew from this base I had enough enemies to make the combat interesting, so I moved ahead from there. The last thing I finished that night was a spike trap, that when you walk over would glow white and then pop up. But as I'm saying this right now, I actually realized that I forgot to put them in the game, so that was a waste of time. But I sent that off as the nightly build and went to sleep. Wednesday, day 3, was set aside for randomized rooms and spawns. What I did for this was make a bunch of predefined shapes for the rooms, and then put in a bunch of objects that would be picked randomly as to showing up or not. So when the level begins, it picks a number from 1 to 10 or 12 or whatever, and then uses that number to determine what things would show up in the level. And then I did the same thing for the spawn points of the enemies. Basically, it's a bunch of points on the map, and then when you spawn into the level, each one of those points would pick a number between 0 and 12. And then if it's 1, 2, or 3, it would spawn one of the enemies that coordinates with that. And then if it's something else, then it just wouldn't spawn an enemy there. And that's it. Randomizing the rooms was a bit tedious, but other than that, it was pretty straightforward. So right now it's technically possible for all of the spawn points to give you a 1, and you just face up against 24 imps. Or all of the spawn points to give you all 0s, and you walk in and I guess technically you could, there is hypothetically a run where you could go through and not face any enemies right up until the boss. Whoops. Anyhow, I sent off the nightly build and moved on to the next day. Thursday, day 4, I spent the day with my family, and we had a movie night, and there was popcorn, and it was wonderful. And, you know, I've got the combat and the room's already done. I can afford to lose a day out of the 7 that I have left. Day 5 was Friday, and that day started off good because Lightspeed 6 sent me some new sounds and the newest version of the music, and Cutout 2.0 sent me the first draft of the story. Holy hell. I don't think I realized just how dark Norse mythology got, but we had to do a lot of PG-ifying to make it a little less. Just less. We had to make it a little less. Like, Norse mythology is dark. But then I went into Gdevelop to work on the next thing I was going to work on when an update came through. It's not supposed to. I have a setting switched off that says that the update's not supposed to go through unless I manually do it. And it came through anyway. And I'm like, okay, whatever. I've been meaning to update. That's a thing I should be doing. It's been an old version for a while. This is probably a good thing. Oh boy, it was not. The old version that I was working on accepted spaces in names and titles and variables. This version does not, which meant I had to go through every line of code and every variable and just everything and take out spaces in everything. It's really a simple thing to do, but it just took like the entire day to make sure I got all of them. But then I was pretty sure I had all of them and moved on to favors, which are going to be our version of boons from Hades. So we picked 12 Norse gods and gave each one of them an ability that you would get from that god. And you'd get to pick them, and then you'd get to have a combination of 4 of them by the time you get to the boss. And I was trying to design them in a way that they would do interesting things when paired together. Like Idun's apple, which we had to look this up, and apparently Idun's apple is in a whole bunch of different mythologies because it started in one place and just spread outwards, which is kind of interesting, but not really relevant. Anyhow, Idun's apple, paired with Vidar's thorns, meant that you could literally just take damage and kill things, theoretically. You could just build health as high as possible and get through the game by letting things hit you. So I was trying to make combinations like that as I was going through, but implementing them just wasn't as simple as I thought it would be. It really should be, and it was for a lot of them, but one of the favors was a dash that would let you go through bubbles. The wizard's bubbles, the ones that were like these really annoying long-range enemies, this favor was supposed to let you dash through them. And I'm going to quickly show you why this was frustrating. I'm supposed to take damage and have an animation flash up to show that I've been hurt, if I didn't have the favor that let you dash through bubbles. But I'd get hit, and there'd be no animation. I'd get hurt, and that's it. Putting in this timer, that literally is always true, because it starts at 0, fixed the issue for some reason. I don't know why. It's literally always true. It doesn't affect it in any way, shape, or form. Maybe somebody out there who's smarter than me knows what's going on, but Anyhow, that day I got the upgrade system working. That would allow your character to get stronger in strength, vitality, or speed each time they died and came back. But I didn't quite get the favor system set up that day, so I sent off the nightly build with just those upgrades. Saturday, day 6, I began the day by pretending that the vanishing spear bug didn't exist, and moved on to favors to get them working in the game. I had made them the night before, so it was really actually easy for me to get them working the next day. It was just a matter of an RNG number picking between 1 and 12, and then when you're hovering your mouse over the card that says that animation, you click on it, and then it ticks the favor from 0 to 1. With this thing done now, there was only one thing left to do for the game to be a finished loop, ignoring the bugs. And that was make a boss. So I've made a boss fight before, this top-down cube landing on the player thing that hopefully it's on screen. But I made this before, so I wanted to do the same thing to save myself time. But since Surtur, the game's end boss, who's supposed to be this giant entity that's supposed to bring about Ragnarok, since that character is a giant, I decided to use his fists. So I drew this terrible work-in-progress hand that I had planned on replacing later. And the first attempt at making the boss chase you around and attack you didn't go as planned. The second time didn't go very well either. The third attempt I was almost there, and by the fourth try I had it. I guess I could have just copy and pasted code from the example game that I made previously, but whatever. And then to give the boss 3 phases, I gave it a second hand, and the second hand is faster than the first one so that they won't be able to sync up. Because if they could sync up, then you could just literally trick the boss into doing both of them at one time, and you would never have to worry about the second fist again. And then for the third phase, it spawns just a bunch of imps. I just made a very quick credit roll and a main menu, and the game was done. And I still had a whole day left to go. I sent off the nightly build and had myself a good night's sleep. Sunday, day 7, I decided it was finally time to tackle that spear bug. I started by trying to track it, and apparently the spear was, according to the engine, where it was supposed to be, but it wasn't, obviously. And after going through all of its variables and doing the IT equivalent of turning it off and on again, I realized that after the update, the one that wasn't supposed to happen, the collision masks on the spear got busted. One of them was literally outside of the spear itself, so I don't know how that would react in-game, but basically the spear just vanished. After finally finding the silly thing, it was fixed, and the game was finally playable again. The last and final thing I had to do with the game was implement the story, which actually took a lot longer than I thought it would. I went through a bunch of different character designs to pick the ones for the main character and then all the gods, and Loki and Freya. And then I recorded this stupid grunt sound and used that one sound with all of the characters with just the pitches altered. And luckily I was able to just copy and paste the text into the scene because of the way the writer had written them. And once these janky story bits were put into the beginning and the end of the game, it was officially done. Like, the whole thing was done. And I sat back and had myself some supper and realized nothing really has any sound. And so, late into the night, me and Lightspeed were scrambling to get sound effects into the game. And then after finally getting all of that in, the game was actually finished. And where it wasn't due until the next day, me and my teammates spent the day playtesting it, just to kind of get a feel for it to make sure everything's okay and there wasn't anything broken. And surprisingly, it was all good. I mean, there was a lot of things I wanted to fix and change, but with only a couple hours left, I didn't want to risk breaking it. So I spent the time making the store icon and stuff like that. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go try to recover from all the chaos I put my body through, and have myself a good, long sleep. If you enjoyed this video, the links to the places that I hang out are down below, and if you decide to click on one, then I'll see you there.